procedures to be used when the patient requires total or partial assistance and when no ceiling lift is available. There are 2 recommended repositioning procedures that can be used to turn a patient from a supine to a side-laying position. These procedures are 1. Turning a patient away from one caregiver and towards the other, and 2. Turning a patient away from both caregivers. 2 or more trained caregivers are required for these procedures. Explain the procedure to the patient. Lower the head of the bed and ensure that the bed bricks are locked. Adjust the height of the bed to the upper thigh level of the shortest caregiver and then lower the side rails. Caregivers stand on opposite sides of the bed, facing the patient between the patient's shoulder and hip. Remove the pillow from under the patient's head and place it at the head of the bed. Instruct the patient to bend her knee that is closest to the side of the bed or away from the direction of the turn. Assist if the patient is unable to bend her knee. Move the patient's bent leg in the direction of the turn to place more of her body weight in that direction. Instruct the patient to cross her arms over her chest or reach towards the opposite side of the bed in the direction of the turn. The patient should be turned using a pushing motion rather than a pulling motion because a pulling motion requires the caregiver to reach across the patient's body, resulting in awkward back and shoulder postures. The caregiver on the opposite side of the bed stabilizes the patient during the turn and provides minimal assistance in turning using a front-to-back weight shift. The caregiver who is turning the patient should place one hand on the patient's shoulder and the other on the patient's hip, with fingers pointed upward. Use a back-to-front weight shift stance with your forearms parallel to the bed. The caregiver on the opposite side of the bed should place one hand on the patient's shoulder and the other hand on the patient's hip, with fingers pointed downward. Choose a leader to count 1, 2, 3, move.
1, 2, 3, move.
On the designated count, shift your weight to your front leg and turn the patient away from you. Avoid pushing with your arms. The other caregiver shifts his or her weight to their back leg during the turn and stabilizes the patient once she is in the side-lying position. While one caregiver holds the patient in a side-lying position, the other caregiver places pillows behind the patient to hold her in position or performs additional care as required. When turning a heavier patient, this procedure may be performed with both caregivers on the same side of the bed. In this case, both caregivers will turn the patient away from them. Ensure that the side rail on the opposite side of the bed is raised for patient safety. Instruct the patient to bend the knee closest to the side of the bed and move that leg toward the opposite side of the bed. Also ask the patient to cross her arms or reach towards the opposite side of the bed in the direction of the turn. One caregiver places his or her hands on the patient's shoulder while the other caregiver places his or her hands on the patient's hip with fingers pointing upward. Choose a leader to count 1, 2, 3, move.
1, 2, 3, move.
Using a back-to-front weight shift, each caregiver shifts his or her weight from the back leg to the front leg. This motion results in the patient being moved away from the caregivers. While one caregiver holds the patient in a side-lying position, the other caregiver places pillows behind the patient to hold her in position or performs additional care as required. In summary, these procedures are used to turn a patient when the patient requires total or partial assistance and when no ceiling lift is available. Each procedure requires 2 or more trained caregivers.